I'm in kind of a weird situation here, because I'm on the opposition, but all of the government material so far fits in so well with what we've done in prep that I actually don't have any refutation to give. So I'm going to skip straight to my constructive material, and I'll note as I go along where it clashes directly with the material that's been given to us by the government so far. Before I do that, though, I would like to note opening government's promise that if they can't keep their religion, you guys can advance to the finals, because we're going to have a point later on why it is we think it's really unlikely that the Tibetan people are going to be able to keep practicing Tibetan Buddhism as they want to, so we'll see you all in the finals next round. Okay, I assume that promise is binding on the judges for some reason. Okay, so firstly, moving on. Why is it that we feel that the continued struggle for independence, that trying to get as much independence, as much autonomy as possible through struggle is so critically important to Tibetan Buddhists? Because on this, what we heard from the opening government near the end of their speech was, these people aren't oppressed, they can still practice their culture and so on and so forth. You know who might disagree with the question of whether Tibetans are oppressed? Tibetans. Specifically, those members of the Tibetan ethnic group who have been fighting, who have been giving up their lives, or who have been providing support for those armed groups, financial support and cultural support, and hiding them and allowing them to carry out guerrilla warfare, which you can't do without the support of without the general support of the populace. But why is it that we think that they feel that way? Because Tibet and China practice have very different cultures, and in particular, very different religions. Tibetan Buddhism is as different from mainstream Chinese Buddhism as Catholicism is from Protestantism, or as Shia Islam is from Sunni. Specifically, the Dalai Lama is the leader of of Tibetan Buddhism, but not of Chinese Buddhism. And their religious leader has been exiled from the country because China thinks he's a threat to them. Because in China, yes, they're a multi-ethnic country. There are lots of different groups. They practice lots of different religions, lots of different cultures. But the important thing is that first and foremost is the state. Because the state has a list of approved religions you can practice. It's inherent to that very concept that you put the state first and your religion second. If the state has to approve your religion. So right now, no, Tibetans can't practice all of their Buddhism as they want to. Their religious leaders can't do as they please, go where they want. No, thank you. We think that in itself is worth fighting for.
So,
no, thank you. Right. So moving on. The second point I'd like to make is that assimilation to the point of not being not suffering significant persecution takes centuries if it ever happens at all. And we see examples of this in African Americans in America or in. No, thank you, sir. Or various native groups in Japan, or also in America come to that, or in most of the places that got colonized by Europe during the colonial period. Why is it that this happens? And I'll take you in a second. Because certain practices, because the way you practice, so the way you look for a start as your ethnicity, the language or dialect you speak, the way you dress if government doesn't want them to try to drop their cultural practice and so on, all of this remind everyone you interact with on a day-to-day basis that you are other, that you are different. It reminds them of the difference that you have a fundamentally different life philosophy, and furthermore, reminds them of that time when you had a violent struggle against their government, which people in China are encouraged to believe in almost religiously, and maybe killed a family member of theirs, or a family member of yours did so, and so on. This encourages people to treat you with hostility. Yes?
Given that it took less than a decade for ethnic Tibetans to assimilate into Nepal, and that the Dalai Lama has currently said he wouldn't want a reincarnation of himself to go forward in the future, why is any of what you're saying true?
Okay, so we dispute the statement that it's taken less than a decade for ethnic Tibetans to integrate, to assimilate. We think there's a problem here with the word assimilate. They live in China, yes, but they still suffer persecution both from the government and hostility from members of other ethnic groups, particularly the Han, in their day-to-day interactions. So thank you. And furthermore, the Dalai Lama declaring that he doesn't plan on reincarnating is because China has is to stop China from like capturing from declaring they found his next reincarnation and taken over Tibetan Buddhism. It's a political maneuver and quite a clever one. Okay, but furthermore, we think that particularly in China, you can't be trusted to, or rather, China cannot be trusted to allow the Tibetans to assimilate to the degree that opening government want them to be able to. Why? Because Tibetan Buddhism is already tied up with the Tibetan struggle for independence, entirely justifiably, by the way, in our opinion. But the point is this: it is still a life philosophy that is emblematic of that particular political movement. This is something that's fairly common for religious movements to become tied up with political movements. This happens in the States, it happens in Israel, and so on and so forth. But the issue is this: that China, after they've said, okay, assimilate, will allow you to keep practicing, will allow you to keep doing whatever you like as long as you just lay down your arms, 1 generation from now, 2 generations from now, can just strike Tibetan Buddhism from the list of approved religions and go on the offensive. China has been known to do this. They've been known to persecute viciously people who practiced religious practices that they saw as contrary to the interests of the state. See value the Falun Gong, who have been persecuted up to and including the point where they got executed and their organs harvested. China is not a country that politically believes in the right of the individual. They're collectivist to the point where any threat to the state is worth stamping on the right of the individual for. This will apply equally well to religion and all the other things that Tibetans hold most dear. And finally, I'd like to argue as to why it is that we think that Tibetans do indeed have a good chance of breaking away from China. Because I don't think I need to belabor the point here that ideally one would not be part of China. China is not a good regime to live under. As I said, they stamp on the rights of individuals, they commit atrocities and so on. But why is it we think they have a decent chance of breaking away? Because opening government noted that all the advantages we pointed out have existed for decades and nothing's changed. But you know what has changed? The entire rest of the world. The world is a much more open place now. Communication is now much more widespread. We, sitting at home on Facebook, can see pictures of the Dalai Lama and read his quotes. The power of the crowd, the power of the common struggle is much greater now, and for this reason, we still think they have a fighting chance, and it's damn well worth fighting.